Hi everyone, we're here in the European Parliament. Once again, we have a group from the Northwest who have been brought over for 2 days to see what work actually goes on here. Do we sit here, don't do anything, or we really work hard? You're going to get a chance now to listen to them. What is their view, what they've seen, what has impressed them, or what hasn't impressed them. So we'll start on the right, far right.
Thanks, Afzal. My name's Oliver. I'm a councillor in Tameside, which is East Manchester. I was elected 2 years ago to the ward of Audenshaw, which is the closest to Manchester Centre. My ward voted to leave the European Union. I voted to remain. The trip today has been fantastic. I think it's been quite inspirational in the sense that we've got a lot of the progressive and cohesive message that Europe sells and tries to bring to the rest of Europe, and just how much buy-in there is from the rest of member states in comparison to the kind of lacklustre debate there was around the referendum that eventually ended with our removal from it. But a really interesting and fantastic day.
Good.
Hello, I'm Siddiqa Ahmed. I live in Levenshulme in Manchester. I'm currently self-employed. I work with women who want to set up their own businesses. I also have a charity for the girls' education in Bangladesh. My interest in politics ranges from supporting the Labour Party campaigns, as well as recently I was chair of one of the mayoral candidates for Greater Manchester, Ivan Lewis. As far as the day today, I have been to Brussels before. However, today has been most enlightening in terms of just looking at the impact of Brexit as it is, and how Afzal and his other colleagues like Teresa, who joined us earlier, have been working really hard to look at how to make sure the negotiations are as painless as possible, if that is possible, because from what I understand, it's not going to be an easy process. But thank you for the invitation. I've really had a good time.
Good. Well, good to have you here. Thank you.
My name's Sharon Hyam. I work for Manchester City Council as a licensing and out of hours officer. I have no sort of political thoughts about anything. I came today with an open mind, and I'm really sorry that your points that you raised today with the lady, was it Teresa, were not made public before the vote, because I think that would have cleared up a lot of people's misconceptions about what actually happened and with the money and what was happening here, because it's so remote from where we are. But I've really enjoyed today, and I've really taken on board everything that's been said and found it really interesting.
Okay, good. Simon?
Hi, Afzal. Well, I'm Simon Greenhalgh. I'm a communications and public affairs specialist. Like Ollie, I've come from a constituency that voted to stay in. That was in Manchester Wivington. But for me today, I think the most sort of striking point was going around the museum, and as a student of history and politics, it kind of worries me that people have forgotten why we engaged in this project, and and why, and just seeing those images of places being invaded and bombs being dropped on people. It's within all our certainly, we had grandparents who remember that, and it seems to me that we've got to a point where this idea of working closer together has been forgotten, and I find that quite sad in a way. It really does.
It's quite interesting because I think this point of peace is the quite idea, isn't it?
Absolutely, yes, yeah.
If you look at the historical context, since the European Union, and the peace we've been able to maintain is the longest period that we have seen. If you go back in the history, you find every 20, 30, we were going to war with one another. And I sometimes think, how do you put a price on peace?
No, absolutely, absolutely.
All those young people and those who lost their lives. How do you put a price on that? And in this whole debate, when we were doing it in the referendum, actually, this wasn't really looked at all. It was virtually about economy and then the immigration and just tossing around with this. And even forgetting that actually the two are also linked. They're separate. They're also actually linked. So it's interesting. What has struck you, coming here? I mean, you had an image, an idea before, and coming here, seeing it for yourself. What do you think has actually struck you?
I think because we'd been out to campaign for the referendum with yourself and Teresa around Manchester, Greater Manchester and the North West on the battle bus.
That's right, the battle bus.
And we had our version of the debate and what we understood to be our Labour voters' point of view and how they saw Europe and their role in Europe, and generally kind of your constituents' view on Europe more in the round. And then comparison to when you come over here, and it's not just about immigration, as you say, or it's not just about what you kind of get out of Europe in terms of material value. It's about that sense of kind of community, and you speak to people here, they're all either bilinguists or in some way just inspired by the culture of other nations across Europe. And I think there's a bit of, although you respect and acknowledge the result of the European referendum, because that will have to go ahead, because it's no right to vote, I think it's a sad thing that we've lost that kind of interaction now. Talking about grandparents before, for instance, my great grandmother, who died last year actually, I remember having a conversation with her about the war and what she remembered about the war years. And she fondly remembers going into the middle of Manchester and running into two Polish airmen who she spoke to for ages. It's the first time they'd ever met anybody from Poland. And similarly, when they had what turned to be some POWs in Manchester, she was the first time that when the war ended, they then settled and she sold ice cream in the area. And it just kind of, it bred that kind of new culture of Europe around Greater Manchester and the North West anyway. And we don't seem to acknowledge that anymore. The immigration debate is an essence of it, but it's not the be all and end all. I think this institution's point of view on that, our point of view on that, in comparison to what people's point of view on that actually was across Greater Manchester, that we couldn't quite change in that few months. As you said before, it was a long run drip feed. It was quite inspiring to see.
I mean, even the immigration point, when I think about it and reflect, and when I talk to people, one thing becomes clear, that it's almost like a generic term. And underneath, there were a number of different issues that people had a concern with. And as political leadership, in a way, we failed to deal with those issues. And the debate became so polarized. And we are where we are. I want to come to you, actually, because I thought it was interesting with your introduction, because what you said was really, look, I'm not quite political, I'm sort of neutral. And so, in a sense, it's very interesting to listen to you. How do you feel, in a sense, someone who's been a neutral in this idea, but coming over, now looking at it? What has struck you?
It was such a shame that this wasn't made people weren't made aware of the impact. Nobody expected Brexit. It wasn't even thought about. So nobody had any plans for how this was actually going to happen. It was thrown into the box as, yes, we are a democracy and we should be able to vote on things and stuff. I wasn't equipped to vote. I didn't have the knowledge to vote. So in that sense, I object to the fact that it was put on me to vote when my knowledge wasn't full, and it was based on people that were telling me lies. As in, we will save 350 million a week for the NHS. Now, things like that, and it became, I mean, I've worked Gorton, Longsight, Levenshulme, that part of Manchester, and I'm very aware of you know, racism, immigration issues and things like this. And on the whole, everybody gets along. So something that was page 1 after the referendum, which was Polish guy gets attacked, before then, that wouldn't have been page 1. So we were playing on the whims of this is an immigration issue, and I don't think it is that at all, because we're all pretty much immigrants from whatever century you like, and we all have a part to play. So from that point of view, I'm really, really sad that this will be wasted to us, will be shut out from here. And after listening to you both talk about it, you know, my children, grandchildren are going to lose out on something, and it's a bit like education for children. It's a gift. So people have messed up. Now my grandchildren won't have that gift, and that makes me really sad.
It's quite interesting how people voted as well, isn't it? So certainly polls show that younger people voted to stay in, and it often was the older generation. When we talk about history, it's surprising in a way. You would have thought people would have memories for why we did it. And also, but I do think somewhere along the line, the message was lost. And I think, I've heard people talk today about the fact that in some ways the vote was lost before you even started the campaign. And I think there's a lot in that. And sometimes, the EU can be seen as a bit of a joke. We don't speak languages. Very, I don't speak French or German. I wish I did. I don't. Partly because of the way the education system is in our school, and there's different priorities. And I don't think we got across some of the key benefits as well. So certainly the economic arguments, and what was again interesting, if you looked at the areas that did, the cities voted to stay in, but areas, some of the most deprived areas in the country which benefited the most from the European Social Fund and actually getting these funds, actually voted against it. So they were voting against the hand that feeds them. In the northwest, so places like Blackpool, which is extraordinary. But somewhere along the line, we're just not getting the message across. And I do slightly disagree with you. I think personally, I would rather we don't have referendums, full stop, because it oversimplifies the issue, and particularly with Europe.
It's a very complicated subject. And straight yes, no point.
That's what I thought. I wasn't equipped to have that vote, but I realise we're a democracy and totally agree with that. However, don't ask me that question because
very good.
I'm not equipped to answer that question.
Somebody else actually said this to me when I was campaigning, and he said, well, "Why do we pay you? We have to answer this."
Exactly.
Hold on a minute. You have a say in this. And seriously, he's dead serious, the person. And he says, no, we pay you to make this decision on our behalf.
Because
why are you asking me?
You're the guys with the knowledge. And that's exactly it. And I know perhaps I should have researched sort of what my vote was going to be and things like that. But where would you research the correct answer?
It's huge. It was huge.
Because,
so this isn't your first trip. You've been here many times. But in a way, in your introduction, you said that in a way you found it quite useful. So what was it? What is it that this time you felt that...
Well, as I say, because I was obviously one of the people who voted to remain. Okay. I've always been a fan of us being in the European Union, and it's interesting to find out from the talks we had earlier about the impact that it's having in terms of negotiating out, and how maybe as you said, one of the main reasons why people voted out was on the immigration card. But when we were listening to you guys earlier, you were saying that actually Britain had a way of controlling immigration from EU from day one. So why did we not use that? You were saying, why were we not asking Theresa May that question? Why are we blaming Europe for it?
I mean, this is interesting. A lot of people don't understand this point.
Well, no, I didn't even understand it myself,
and
actually.
You've been here many times.
Again, Theresa May, well, everyone has the opinions on it, but to be fair to Theresa May, she wasn't on the Brexit side, was she?
No, she wasn't. She was for remaining.
And so now she's got to make the best of what is a bit of a mess.
But she could have spoken up at the time.
A bit more, yes.
Just very briefly, because we talked about this earlier, and Afzal raised it about the rights of EU citizens in the UK generally, and there's a campaign run on that. But I think the way we just talked about immigration in the main, and there's a lot of talk on kind of YouTube and American media, especially about this kind of post-fact era, whereby it's not so much what the rationality of it is, it's about how you feel about the issue generally. And I think it was Tony Blair, I think, actually, when the referendum came out, who wrote this piece to say, it wasn't so much that people felt they had a problem with immigration. It wasn't so much even our argument, which is it immigration itself, or is it housing, or is it jobs, or whatever? What can we address to kind of minimise the effects of this? It's more that people feel that they're not kind of being engaged in a debate. And I think we've not shied away from it in the Northwest, but there are some places where parties generally at the centre or the centre left are essentially told, immigration is a topic that you can either approach carefully or that we can't kind of get a position on yet. So people probably generally felt they couldn't engage in that, and I think although we raised it on the doorsteps in our areas and said, well, what is the problem about immigration?
Part of it was about saying that there was no control, though, and actually we had control from what we've discussed
there are a number
today.
Of mechanisms
there were
which helps
control
you to
mechanisms
control,
which weren't utilised and exercised.
But the lack
so the
of
failure
jobs.
of our government, they failed to answer on that point. Not a zero person has been actually sent back from EU. It's not that they can't; they never enforced it. Quickly, look, time is running out. But the question I want to ask is, there's a lot of this debate now, in a sense. We've got a referendum result. and the government is trying to move forward, although I think they haven't got a clue at the moment where they're going with this. But the question ultimately is, well, what happens down the end of the road? And the argument some people are developing, and I'd like to hear your views on that very quickly, is, it's almost, we've said, okay, this is the door, we've got to go out, but nobody actually said, what's on the other side of this door? Yeah, is it a cliff? Is it a tunnel? Is it the world? What is it? Yeah, and once that becomes clear with the negotiation, then what is it that should be done, in a sense? Because that is the point where actually we will be in the best position to know pros and cons. And the argument then is, should a stock be taken at that point before we jump, or this is it? Whatever, even if it's against our interest, we should still jump. I don't know whether it's we're talking about a second referendum, or we're talking about Parliament discussing this more, or what other mechanism. But for me, what I've not been able to answer myself in the head is this: okay, once the whole thing becomes clear to everyone, this is the price for being inside, and this is the option for being outside. Then, in a way, it's easy to sort of say yes or no, and should that be done or not? Quick now. This is not the...
I think this is absolutely an issue for Parliament to vote on, and yourself, and to be involved as politicians to dictate that onto what we've said on the doorstep. It's a very cut and thrust issue. Nobody's disagreeing that you should leave Europe, and nobody's saying that you shouldn't leave Europe eventually. The fact is, as you say, it's how you get there, what terms you do it on. It's not as it's painted in terms of cutting a rope and you get it all back suddenly. It's a long process. We've heard about Canada's renegotiation process, never mind ours, and it's got to be up to Parliament and parliamentarians in the UK, as well as MEPs, and people coming forward to say, this is how Europe works, this is what we do. Make sure we've got the negotiators, make sure we've got the teams together to get the best deal for everybody. It's got to be, in terms of that indirect democracy, as Sam raised before, through Parliament. I think it's the only way forward.
Okay.
Well, I would suggest that we do what you just suggested, actually, that given what you've said earlier about not being fully informed when you voted, and that was irresponsible to ask people to make such a huge decision, then perhaps, as you say, when we've got all the cards on the table and we know what's on each side of the door, then perhaps there should be an opportunity for people to look at it again and say, yes, we agree, or we don't agree with this move.
So is it the people or the Parliament?
Well, I guess it's a difficult one, because again, if people feel that it's too much of an ask to ask them, perhaps Parliament needs to do it. But it's very difficult without asking your constituency, because otherwise, if you were from a constituency where they voted no, then you don't know. Are you going to vote knowingly, or are you going to vote because your constituents voted no? Do you know what I mean? So that's the question.
It's a difficult one, isn't it? Which way do you turn with that? What would you? You're the ideal person here. Tell us.
Well, no, but would your constituents have voted that way if they'd have had the full story?
Yeah.
Because now we're supposed to be Brexit. I'm not really sure how we got to that name. Now we're supposed to be Brexit, but now we're talking, well, should we have a second referendum? So it's a bit like Scotland. You vote a certain way, and that's it then. No other referendum, but the people that's supposed to know what was going to happen, either way we voted, don't seem to know anything.
No.
Like, we're applying for an Article 50 or something?
Yeah, Article 50, yeah. No,
right, I don't actually know what this is talking about. Okay, but to whether we activate something.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry, did we not have any guidelines? Why ask us the question at a referendum when he thought he knew the answer to the question he was asking? And that's what I was taught as a parent. The only question I asked my children was the one that I knew the answer of, because otherwise I was on a bit of unsteady ground.
Yeah.
So the politicians have brought this to us now. Now you have to find the best way, and that's the guys with the knowledge to how we're going to deal with this, whether it's a Canadian I don't understand the bit about Canada.
It's about agreement. How do we deal with it?
Yeah, whether this is, whether are we actually coming out, or whether is this to plan, discuss the best for us, because all I want is the best for my family in the future and the best for you guys, obviously. And the way I've always looked on Manchester as a whole is, like you were saying about only speaking English. I was an education welfare officer for Old Moat, and there was 14 different languages spoke at that primary school. That wasn't in any way detrimental to the education. It was a
Sorry, we need to quickly.
So, well, I don't know if you're coming through for an answer. So I think we live in very uncertain times.
Yeah.
I think if you look at the context in the UK, 48% of people actually voted to remain.
Yeah.
We've just had a by-election where the Lib Dems have won a seat predominantly on that because they wanted to stay in there. We could have a general election next year, and that could change things again. Yeah. In Europe, we've got big elections coming up in Germany and France, and internationally, again, really uncertain times, and we've got Trump. Yeah. So who knows?
Yeah, look, thank you very much. Let me say this. Look, it's a huge and complex subject, and something which I think we're going to keep on talking for, I think, a few years at least.
Absolutely.
It's not an easy one. There has to be lots of debate. We need to be thinking about all this, because end of the day, for me, with this result, we've managed to split our country. It's clear, with 48 one side, 52 another side, real strong feelings with a part of them. Probably the center is the big chunk really, who just wants to make sure that whatever we do, we have that unity in the country, and we have a deal which works for Britain, which works for our future generations, and whatever that means. This is what the politicians now actually have to deliver. Thank you very much. We'll hopefully have another group and see what their views are as well. Thank you.